Hello, everyone. Welcome to IP Watchdog Unleashed, where each week we journey into the world of intellectual property to discuss the laws, news, policy, and politics of innovation, technology, and creativity. With analysis and commentary from industry thought leaders and newsmakers from around the world, IP Watchdog Unleashed is hosted by world-renowned patent attorney and the founder of IPWatchdog.com, Gene Quinn, who has twice been named one of the most influential people in the intellectual property community and recognized numerous times as one of the top IP strategists in the world. Take it away, Gene.
Thanks, Renee, and welcome everyone to this week's edition of IP Watchdog Unleashed. This week, our conversation is one that we had during our annual Patent Masters program several weeks ago. With this panel, we were at a pivot point in the program where we began to slowly move the conversation from just getting patents and managing portfolios and into monetization and litigation. And this conversation took us to the intersection between building and acquiring portfolios, litigating, monetizing, enforcing, and licensing. We're not going to talk about monetization per se, and we're also not going to talk about litigation either. Instead, we focus on the due diligence that's required in order to understand what it is that you own and in order to get your arms around the portfolio that you have. What do you believe that you have that's valuable? What do you believe that you have that's not valuable? Are they actually valuable? Are the assets actually not valuable? Do you have too many patents in a certain area and maybe not enough patents in another area? So there's a whole lot of questions that you must answer before you ever decide whether or not you will or can monetize, whether you will or decide to sell assets, whether you will license the assets, whether you'll seek a loan with the portfolio's collateral, and of course, whether or not you'll pursue an enforcement campaign. But before you decide how you're actually going to turn those patents into revenue, you have to do the due diligence and make some hard choices and sometimes come to some uncomfortable truths about what it is that you've acquired over time, what you might not be able to do about it, what you might still be able to do something about, and what information can you learn to send back to the patent prosecutors and business people so they can develop the portfolios you need moving forward with monetization in mind. So this is a big conversation, and for this conversation, I invited Carl Marsh and Dean Giebel. Carl's a former patent attorney and the current head of patent advisory and monetization practice at Hilco Global. He started his career as a patent litigator at Jones Day and moved in-house at Eastman Kodak and then to Dow Chemical. Throughout his career, he's managed teams charged with growing patent portfolios and finding monetizable assets. Dean is chief patent counsel for Samtec. He entered the industry first as a patent agent in 1997 and became a patent attorney in 1999. He spent 6 years in private practice before moving in-house, first at FCI and then to Samtec, where he has been for the last decade. When Dean joined Samtec, they did not have an in-house IP position, so he had to start the patent department from scratch, and today the company owns more than 1,750 utility patents and a whole lot of design patents. What comes next picks up after topic and speaker introductions and begins from the very beginning, at least as I see it, which is getting your arms around the patent portfolio that you own. I think maybe the first thing for us to start with is that one of the key topics, at least in my mind, and if you disagree with anything that I say, please feel free to do so and explain your point of view. But it seems to me that one of the most important places here to start when you're trying to get your hands around a portfolio is to decide, what do I have that's core? What do I have that's maybe defensive? What do I have that might be more valuable to somebody else? And maybe there's other categories as well. And if there are, please feel free to share them. Because if you don't understand your portfolio, I don't know how you could possibly, one, defend it to the people who are paying for the building of it to get the resources you need. And then two, what's your message to those people who maybe you want to partner with you? Maybe they need a license. Maybe you need cross-license situation. If you don't have the narrative about what you own, how can you do any of this? So do I have a volunteer to lead us off with that question, what you do? Maybe I'll start with Dean. In your portfolio, I guess it boils down to how do you get your arms around what is in it?
Yeah, so we have a lot of different products, and the first thing I look at when I look at any patent is, does it cover what we're doing or does it cover what a competitor's doing? And if it's not, then I question its value. The second thing I look at is, will the patent survive litigation? And the third thing I look at is, if a third party looks at the patent, will they think it'll survive litigation? And that last part is probably the most important part, because if a third party is not willing to take the risk of being sued, then they're more likely to license the patent if we're willing to license it to them. And in our industry, because we do a lot of second sourcing with OEMs and CEMs, because nobody wants to be single sourced because of price and supply chain issues, we have to license most of our things to somebody else involuntarily. So when we write a patent application, we have to assume that that patent is going to be licensed and that somebody's willing to pay for it. And it's very embarrassing if we filed all this money on patents and the third party licensee says, well, we're not that interested.
Now, Carl, as a business guy here, I'd like you to react to not only what Dean said, but to also comment on the situation where you're trying to help someone get their arms around what it is that they own. What in your mind is the first place they should look? What should they be concerned with first and foremost?
From our perspective, and we do exactly what Gene said as a service offering, we help companies, we call them a patent taxonomy, where we help companies get their arms around what we have. So in addition to core, non-core, is it going to be is it on somebody's product roadmap? Is this potentially going to be in a product someday? What does this business unit think of these set of patents? Is this something that somebody might do? Or is this, Betamax and the industry went VHS type of situation? And then we also map against, obviously, our own product revenue. We map against segment revenue. That's an important consideration. We map against growth curves. Is this the example I always use is Dow Chemical. Dow had a very successful plastics business, probably 20% of the company's revenue. And they used that to justify a prosecution budget that was significant. But when you look at the market shares in that segment, there was nothing that could be done with the patents. And so continuing to invest in a portfolio where you have this huge market share and you're not going to sue any of those competitors was not money well spent. And so we flipped it on its head and started de-investing in those patents, which is not intuitive when you think about mapping it to revenue. So we map companies' portfolios against all those things. And then the thing that we love to see is a situation where a company owns patents. They for whatever reason, didn't pursue that particular business, but others in the industry did. And so all of a sudden, any corporate sensitivities around monetization are lessened because they're not in that segment. They don't have competitors. There's no boomerang effect to doing monetization activities. So all that stuff sort of comes out of getting your arms around what you have. Not only what does it mean to your company in terms of core and non-core, but what does it mean to the industry and what other people are doing with it? Because that's really where you get the freestanding monetization opportunities.
So let me follow up with you with if there's something you can point to that you see over and over again that companies do wrong, in your opinion, or don't do to the maximal extent that would be most efficient or most beneficial. What are those one or two item points that you're constantly saying, you need to do this, you need to do that?
It's easy, and it's paying attention to the market, looking outside the company at what other people are doing with this technology. And it's like getting to know the inventors, because they're the ones that are really immersed in that segment. And they're the ones that certainly they're working on their invention, but they talk to other people, they pay attention, they know how this technology is eventually going to come to market. And taking that feedback and feeding it back into the prosecution process, where you start thinking about, how do I prosecute patents that are essentially placing bets as to how this technology is going to come into the market? Because obviously the more bets you place, the more likely 5 years down the road, you're going to have monetizable assets. And so the answer to your direct question, Gene, is the piece that companies leave out is that feedback between what's going on in the market and how we can improve our portfolio based on it.
Dean, is there anything that you would like to respond to give you an open microphone at the moment?
Yeah. So one of the things, to me, patent valuation is like alchemy. I still can't figure it out. So we file a patent application that covers a commercial product. And I know by looking at the sales, the shipped to and the sold to countries, I know where we're selling them. I know how much we're selling. I know what the sales look like year to year. I can get all that information. Great. So we're selling $25 million a year in the US. We're selling $10 million in Hong Kong. We're selling $10 million in China. We're selling $15 million in Europe. Beautiful. I still don't know that the reason why we have the sales is because of the patent. So we have a patent and we have sales, but I don't know if the patent's actually protecting the sales. So I can't really make a valuation and say, well, the patent's worth this much in EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes, because I don't know if people are not making the part because of the patent, or they're not making the part because nobody wants the part other than the customers we're selling to, because of the volumes that we're selling to. So it's fascinating to me how the economists and how you guys can do valuation, because I can't pin down. So if I license a patent to somebody, I have a royalty revenue stream coming in. I know how much that's worth. But again, I don't know if it's because of the patent or if it's because of the drawing package that we gave the competitor that allows them to make tooling immediately, if that's what they're paying for. So it's very difficult to figure out when they ask me, well, value our patent estate. I don't know. Now, one thing I do is I keep track, all the patents that we have, I assign a part number if there's a part number available. So I can do a direct correlation between the patent and the products that we sell that are covered by the patent. And that's information that can be accessed by others in the company in case they get hit by a bus. And that's how I keep track of it. And we do our review every 3 or 4 years to prune. I can go through the business and say, okay, this is the patent. These are the countries we filed in. Oh, by the way, we should have filed in Romania because that's where all the sales are now. And should we kill the patent or should we keep it? And whenever they do their technological ranking, their how much revenue we're protecting ranking, that's all something that they can consider.
So, Carl, what do you say about that? How do you get your hands around what the patent is actually worth, not knowing, as Dean said, why the competitors are staying away from your market?
Well, you assume, and we do patent valuations, and I don't know that I'll go so far as to say that it's alchemy, but there's some art and there's some science, and where the art and the science lines up is a sliding scale. The more difficult part when valuing, because look, if there's, and I keep using Betamax and VHS as a silly example, which, when I say that to my kids, they look at me like, what is, Betamax and VHS? But of course, they don't know. To them, my years of Kodak were lost because they have no idea what that company even was. But I digress. The harder part is when you have a brand involved, because I can tell you whether a product whether your patents cover Betamax revenue or VHS revenue. And it's kind of funny when we see valuations, because we do a fair amount of distressed asset work. So we'll inherit valuations, from a shareholder, from a lender or something like that. And you'll literally look at the portfolio and go, well, they valued these based on VHS revenue, but the patents cover only Betamax. So what are we actually doing here? So you have to, obviously you can look at the claims and tell if they cover the product. The harder part is when there's a brand involved. Obviously that's intellectual property. In a lot of ways, brands are more powerful than patents. So for me, valuing a patent portfolio based on existing revenue, there are assumptions being made, but that's not that hard of a valuation to make. Projected revenue gets a little harder because you have to decide, is this group capable of commercializing a product, and how much am I going to attribute to if it's a startup that's never commercialized anything, how much value am I attributing to, even if they have the strongest patent portfolio ever, there's a commercial aspect to it. And then layering on the brand is even another layer, because brands do provide exclusivity and differentiation in the market. And so that's a complicating factor. So I agree with you that it's partially art and partially science, and we can all look at valuations and see the analysis that was done and what the purpose was for the valuation, which is a lot of the driver. If it's transfer pricing, internal to foreign entities, we do a lot of that. That's a certain type of valuation. If it's a fair market valuation, if it's, a liquidation valuation, those all have different metrics applied to them. And there is art and there is science to it. But if it's done right, it makes sense to me anyway, and can be done.
Yeah, just so I'm clear, just because I don't understand it doesn't mean that that it's not right.
So let me go back to this point, because I think you were starting to fish in this pond about getting your arms around not only what you have, but what it's worth. I don't want to get past the what you have part, because would you agree that oftentimes, maybe far too often, most companies don't really have a good understanding of what they own for a variety of reasons? So it's hard to, and then you have continuations, and then you have some of the maintenance fees aren't paid, and some of the annuities aren't paid, and sometimes it's accidental, sometimes it's on purpose, and then in the U.S. you have double patenting issues that need to tie these things together, and you got to keep both of them, and so there's a whole host of reasons why that's difficult. But how do you think? First off, would you agree that it is far more difficult than probably people who have never had to do it think it is?
100%.
Okay, Dean?
Yes.
Okay. So how do you do it? How do you try and keep all of these players on the same page? Dean, I know you have patents all over the world. Do you have your U.S. counsel run point for the rest of the world and are giving those folks guidance on, this is what we're doing, this is what we're trying to accomplish, keep your eye on this ball, so that all of your global counsel are taking instructions from you or from your U.S. counsel, or a little bit of both? How does that work? And the reason I raise this, Dean, is because the things you say here are going to have impact over there. The same goes the other way. What they say over there is going to have impact here. And if most of your patents are here, you got to make sure your foreign folks are on the same page. How do you do that?
So whenever we get the invention disclosure form in, the first thing I do is I read it, talk to the inventors, get lots of pictures because I'm a picture person, and I write a set of claims that I think cover our commercial product and get around all the prior art that I know of. And I do a pretty exhaustive search. I've been doing this for 23 years. I kind of know where to look. So I write the claims that I think get around all the prior art that I'm aware of. I send that to outside counsel and say, I don't care what else you do, but make sure these claims are in this patent application. You can add to it. You can get creative, get freaky, whatever you want to do. I don't care, but make sure this stuff is in there. And then when we file our PCT, I'm a big fan of PCTs too, because you get a search, another search, because I don't know everything. So we get the search, we have the PCT claims, and then those PCT claims get populated all over the globe as is. China will take all of them. You have a chance to amend voluntary amendments and stuff, but we know that the claims that are being presented at one time covered the commercial product and are free of all the prior art that we're aware of. And then that gets cookie cutter dispersed throughout the rest of the world, so that I know that the U.S. case, and I only have to look at the U.S. case, and I know what's going on in the other cases, unless a piece of prior art pops up from those cases that would change our philosophy. So it's easy to manage if you do the work up front and figure out what you're trying to get from the get-go.
So it's process oriented.
It's process, yeah. Yeah, and the other thing too is, and somebody brought it up the other day, we don't do anything at any stage where we have to spend money, because my job is to keep all the revenue for the shareholder, not to give outside counsel a second beach house. I know it's not popular, but it's where we are. So at every stage of the whenever we file a PCT, whenever we get an office action, we have a patent committee, and I say, this is where we are. Should we spend more money? And if they say no, then that's it. If they say yes, we keep rolling. And that's how what it does is it forces the business to refreshes their recollection of what we actually filed 3 years ago when we filed the provisional, and it keeps it in their mind so they don't forget about it. And that's to your earlier point, you get big companies and they have all these stuff and you forget about it over here, and personnel change, and you get lawyers that leave and come in. They don't remember what their predecessor did. This is a way to keep everybody constantly coming back to the same touch points.
So we're talking about so far, I think, Carl, still like kind of spinning up, making sure that what we're going to get is going to be relevant, and it's going to be valuable. It's going to read on competitors, or at least read on the stuff that we're trying to sell, so that competitors can't easily get into our space without some serious potential consequences. So now this is the non-glamorous stuff. This is the non-sexy stuff, but this is the essential stuff to get your hands around what it is that you're creating. So now let's maybe in the second half of this conversation say, okay, what of these skills do we then apply to, okay, we have this portfolio. Maybe we created it. Maybe you're inheriting it. You're let's say, Dean, not that you're going to leave your company, but you're going to become chief patent counsel at another company at a portfolio where you didn't spin up with all these processes in place. How do you spin this backwards so that you can figure out what you really have and what's the wheat and what's the shaft?
Yeah, I mean that sort of describes my career, at my in-house career anyway, in a couple sentences, because I didn't generate the Kodak portfolio, I didn't generate the Dow portfolio, but I was asked to go find monetizable assets. And so you do it on a business unit by business unit basis. And I think what are the hallmarks of a patent portfolio that gives companies a bunch of revenue generation opportunities is a different IP strategy for each business unit. It's hard to apply an IP strategy across business units because the markets are so different and the sizes are different, and there's so many. I'm assuming we're talking about a large company here, but in general, it's all different, and it's not a one size fits all. So the companies that have sophisticated portfolios and revenue generation opportunities are the ones that did this on a business unit by business unit basis. So when you go in and look at it, to your point, how do you find what you have? You do it that way, and it's a little bit of a sometimes eye-opening for the prosecution team and even the chief IP counsel, because it's a little bit of a thumbs up, thumbs down. Either we have monetization opportunities in there, or we've got a bunch of stuff that's picture claims and covers what we have and nothing else, and it is what it is. There's defensive, obviously, benefits to that, but there's nothing in there that you can monetize. And when you find those situations, that business unit all of a sudden gets super motivated to figure out how can we generate better patents, because we see our sister business unit getting all these bonuses because they've got all this end of year revenue that the licensing program is bringing in. So getting your arms around it is certainly the first step, because you know what's in there. The next step from an in-house perspective is how do we do better down the road?
Dean, thoughts?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways. So one way you can do it is whenever the U.S. maintenance fees come up for renewal, you can go to the business and say, is this worth spending the money? And then annotate that and then apply that to the whole family. So if they're not interested in the U.S. patent at 12 years, they're probably not worried about the one in China, the corresponding ones in China either. But that's a slow iterative process. Unfortunately, the way I've always had to do it was the brute force method, where I pull the U.S. patent, I find the broadest claim, and we sit down and we have a 3 or 4 day marathon session where we go through every single patent family and say, this is what we ended up getting. Don't know what you thought you were going to get. This is what we got. And should we still keep it or not? And they're motivated to get rid of the deadwood because that frees up money for the stuff that they are interested in. Or it might be that, we're still making tons of money and they want to still keep the patent. But unfortunately, and the only person that can do that is in-house counsel, I think, to go through every single patent family, summarize it, show where the countries are, and then say, what do you think? And the business people hate it, even more than me, because I'm the one who has to do the initial work. They hate to sit there and look at patents for days and days and days. So you have to convince them it's in their interest that you're helping them help them.
Yeah.
We get brought in a lot to do that for 2 reasons. One, CFOs trust us more than they trust patent attorneys. And I'm technically a patent attorney, but I'm also like the dumbest patent attorney. So if I can understand it, then a CFO, I can make a CFO understand it. So even if your patent team has gone through and done this deep dive, there's still, is this really the right answer? So we can come in and say, well, look, there's no external value. It doesn't cover a product. We totally agree with their analysis. The other reason we get brought in is a little bit different. It's the chief IP counsel or the GC doesn't want to be the one to tell these business unit leaders, many of whom are the inventors, that we're going to drop these because they don't have commercial value. They would like someone else to come in and deliver that bad news. So
that's the role of the consultant, to come in and deliver bad news.
And I have a terrible horror story for doing this for a Fortune 500 company. And because we do it on a family basis or even a segment basis, because if you're going to drop one family, to your point, Dean, you're going to drop everything in the family. But you should expand that and look to see what else is adjacent that would even though it's not up for renewal, is going to meet the same end, and just let's get rid of the whole thing in one fell swoop, either to sell it or just save the maintenance fees. But we were doing this we call it thinning the herd. We were doing it for Fortune 500 company. We probably had 20 or 25 families that we were recommending dropping. And every single slide was met with more and more resistance. And one of the guys on my team passed me a note, like I was taking a deposition, and he goes, "Look at the list of inventors." And so I opened up my spreadsheet and I'm like, oh my God, all the inventors are in this room. Like every single drop is right here. And I did not make the mistake again.
So let me ask you, we've been, this word hasn't come up yet, but I keep hearing it in my head as we're having this conversation, picture claim. And I will admit, years ago, I thought picture claims were those types of things that patent attorneys got for clients because they couldn't get anything valuable. So they were going to get something so extraordinarily narrow that no reasonable examiner could say no. Then as we started doing more programs and I started interviewing people and I've talked to literally hundreds of in-house counsel over the last 10 years or so. I started having a different view of picture claims, because if you do have a product, you got to make sure that the product is actually covered. I mean, even if it's just simply we need to make sure that we can stop knockoffs on Amazon, for example, right? And if you don't have a picture claim, you don't have a design patent that covers something that's tangible, that's a much harder job than a lot of people realize. So if you have a design patent that covers something that's tangible and you have a good set of picture claims, I think it's valuable now based on all the feedback I've gotten over the years. So the question I have for you is, do you agree? Do you disagree? What is the role of getting picture claims? And obviously you can't only have picture claims, but what is your take on picture claims?
So you hit the nail directly on the head. You have to have picture claims, but you can't only have picture claims, because if you only have picture claims, the only way those patents are valuable is if somebody knocks off your product directly. So to me, you should absolutely dedicate part of your portfolio to protecting exactly your product, because people do knock it off, especially if it's a consumer product. Amazon you need that claim. But to have external value, your team, including the inventors, and I would include even somebody from the CFO's office in those discussions, somebody from marketing. I always say the larger the organization, the more difficult it is to make sure that your claims line up with your business strategy. Or say it more broadly, your patent strategy lines up with your business strategy. The larger the company, the more difficult it is, because those strategies change all the time. But in smaller organizations, they're acutely aware of what the company is doing, but that's not always the case. So picture claims are important from a competitive perspective, but from a external, is somebody going to infringe this perspective? That's when you need the broader team to think more strategically about how is this technology going to eventually come to market? Where are we going to place bets in our portfolio to make sure that if this goes to market in one of the ways we've articulated, or our crystal ball, that we're going to have revenue generation opportunities. So that's my answer to picture claims, which I use pejoratively to mean I went and looked at your portfolio and it's super narrow because everyone's just focused on what we're doing as a company and no one was looking at what everybody else is doing as
where the
industry.
market may wind up going.
Exactly.
Right. So I think you need, but what is your take on picture claims?
Oh, so whenever I was in private practice, the way I was taught to write a patent application, and this is going back to the late 90s, first set of claims are apparatus, second set of claims are method, third set of claims are picture/licensing claims. That's the one that you think that will survive litigation and the competitors are going to look at and go, okay, this is what we're going to license. Everything else above it is wishful thinking, okay? But you're pretty sure that the last claim, there's enough limitations, it'll survive litigation, there's no estoppel because you don't have to amend it, poof, there you go. And I think that's smart. And not only is it smart on the utility side, but if you filed a big design patent filer like Samtec is, I just filed a case the other day, a single family. We filed with 220 drawings in 10 countries. So it's going to be roughly 100 different design cases by the time they're all divided out, because the competitors have to copy exact because it's in a standard. And when it's in a standard, that's the whole point of a standard, is it has to be intermatable, intermountable. So you have to copy exact. So we spent the money because we're going to make a ton of money.
See, and that's the thing. I think I've said this so many times throughout my career. Design patents are so undervalued. And I am just shocked that more design patents aren't filed and obtained every year for these reasons. I mean, and because if you look, I always used to, when I was representing mostly startups and smaller size companies, I would always talk to them about, who do you want to be? What do you want to be? And then look at what they do, right? And in a lot of industries, whether like the shoe industry, athletic shoes in particular, the automotive industry, there's a handful of industries where the major players, the Fortune 500 companies, have got gigantic design patent portfolios. So why would you not have at least some? Why would you not have at least some?
And the thing about design patents are they make you think really, really hard about what it is you're trying to claim. So in the U.S., in Ray Owens, you have to have all your boundary lines put in whenever you file, so you can claim the different parts that you want to claim. However, in China, you have to file all of your drawings as you want them the day you file in that country, because you can't change anything. You can file a partial design, but you can't then narrow that partial design in a divisional. You're stuck with whatever first partial design you put in there. You can't change broken lines to solid lines in a partial design. You can't change any solid lines to broken lines. So you have to know going ahead, okay, these are what I want to do, and this is all the protection I'm ever going to get. Because if you file in Europe, it's registration. There is no examination. So you better make sure you did it right the first time. Same with Malaysia. Korea's tough, like China on the line drawing changes. So you have to kind of think about all this stuff ahead of time, file them all together, and hope you're right. but if you break it up with boundary lines and you do your partial designs and you get the parts that somebody has to do to make it intermatable, let's say, that flies in Asia. It doesn't fly in Europe because of the must fit rule, but it forces you to talk to the business people and say, okay, is this design going to change? Because if it is, then we might have a problem. And you pick the parts. Another safety tip: if you're filing a design patent and there's like 12 different embodiments, pick the part that's common to all 12 first, and then go after each individual embodiment later. Because otherwise, if you don't do that, then you're going to have to be sitting there filing divisional after divisional after divisional to cover the stuff that was in the original case.
I also think it's critically important in this conversation to have some idea, although you can't predict the future, but to have some idea about how am I going to try and use these patents or this portfolio or this family down the road. And one of the thoughts that jumps into my head along these lines is, if you are a company that is going to have, you're going to go to, or your competitors are going to go to CES, for example, the Consumer Electronics Show, you need to have design patents. You absolutely 100% need to have, and you need to have a lot of them. And the reason is because when at the CES every year, there's a TRO, at least one, going to be issued in a design patent case, because you can go up to the District of Nevada and you show the judge, this is the picture that the patent office gave me. Here's a photograph of what they're displaying in this booth number. And it becomes a matching game, like a Sesame Street level, are these things the same kind of game? And you can get a TRO in a patent case on the design. Now, will it stand up? Who knows? I don't know whether these cases ever go any further than the TRO, because your goal is to prevent them from selling that or getting orders for that in that booth during the 4 days that CES is open. And then you move on. And we've had, on this very stage, we've had the folks from Ridge Wallet Company come and talk about their strategy with Amazon and design patents and critically timing the enforcement to get knockoffs taken down off of Amazon during the holiday season when people are trying to buy these as gifts. And if you could get it taken down off of Amazon for the right 2 weeks, even a small company can make several $100,000 extra by having their competitors down off of Amazon for the right 2 weeks in December. So, but you have to, I think, have that. I may want to do this, I may want to do that, and I have to have a portfolio that allows me to do that. And if I don't have a portfolio that allows me to do that, then damn it, I need to get one and I need to build it.
So trade shows generally are a gold mine for informing IP strategy. And and as many people on your internal team that you can send to these trade shows, it's gold for a couple reasons. One, you see firsthand what your competitors are investing in and where they're going. And two, salespeople will answer any question, no matter how ridiculous it is. And you can get salespeople to tell you exactly what this company is doing. They will email you drawings. They will do anything because they're salespeople. And so we routinely use that to go figure out what the market is doing.
Your salespeople get you in trouble and they get your competitors in trouble and help you. And that's just the way of the world. You got to go to trade shows. You have to be paying attention.
Can I have one more thing?
Sure,
Jim?
go ahead.
I have some statistics real quick. So from in Q1 to Q3 of last year in China, the number of patent grants for utility cases dropped 17%. Utility model grants dropped 26%. There were 53,000 grants of U.S. cases to foreign entities based on 682,000 grants. 682,000 grants, only 53,000 were to non-Chinese entities. The foreign utility models to non-Chinese entities was 3,402 out of 1.1 million. Both are decreased. So the number of design case grants rose by 4%. And there's an article in February, I think, of 2025, Wall Street Journal. They wrote an article and said that in China, they're using the courts to invalidate patents that are in their way, Western patents that are in their way, and particularly in biotech, pharmaceuticals, in technology, and in rare earth minerals. So if you're filing in China in one of those technology areas and you have a patent, to the point of this panel about valuation, good, you have a patent. What does that mean? But the design patents, I think you can still enforce because there's a lot few levers that somebody can pull to invalidate that patent.
Well, and that maybe brings us full circle to like all of this diligence and preparedness we're talking about, so you can understand what you have and does it meet the strategies that you may someday need, or maybe that now you want. We have to come to the terms with I think the reality is the value of a patent is only based on what somebody else is willing to pay for it. And often that is only going to manifest itself in litigation. So I think when you're doing this, you need to make sure that the assets that you have can survive the diligence they're going to face if you should choose to enforce them. And in some spaces, you're not going to get any licensing conversation going unless you have the ability to enforce them or the will to enforce them. And that's, I think, very unfortunate. But I think at some point in time, you got to say, okay, I know what we were trying to do. I know what we got. I know what strategies I want to use. Now, is this going to stand up? Would you agree or disagree with that?
So one thing that a seed I always plant with clients, especially clients that have a renewed interest in a filing strategy in a particular business unit, is the standards for a litigation ready patent it's inherently a moving goalpost. At a time, like the Federal Circuit just could place this more and more exacting standards on the prosecution process. And every case that comes down is, oh, this didn't get done, or this didn't get done, or this didn't get done. At the same time, patent prosecution years ago has become a commodity. And so those two things are completely inconsistent. We're placing such a high premium on this thing being prosecuted correctly while enforcing budgets on our outside counsel that are somewhat unrealistic. And so the seed I always plant with clients is, let's not be let's rethink the cap fee model or the fixed fee model or whatever it is. And if we've got an important invention here and we want to place bets on how this is coming to market, let's do a different thing, and let's pay, the hourly rate, or at least relax some of these standards to get a good specification that's well thought out, that has all the different, claims that Dean outlined, which are critical. And let's rethink this prosecution process, because it only gets judged 10 years down the road and then it's too late to fix it. So if we're going to invest in patents in the first place, let's give our patent prosecution team a fair shake to do what they need to do.
Thoughts on that, Dean? I mean, it is true. I've looked at portfolios. I won't say which portfolio it was, but several years ago, somebody asked me for some advice on whether this portfolio was going to be successful in litigation. And I looked at it, and you could see every couple of years, and it was software related, but every couple of years, their patents were different. I know, okay, that was in response to Bilski. Okay, well, that was in response to Alice. That was in response to KSR. That was in response to Second Pair of Eyes, going all the way back, And the only common thread was, by the time it got to the Federal Circuit, was nope, 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 nope. And you saw them chasing the standard and never quite succeeding. That's got to be a part of your review when you're looking at your portfolio, right?
It is. And my philosophy is, and everybody has their own opinion on this, but I like to examine our patent applications before they're filed with the patent office. So I want to look at the claims. I want to look at all the prior art that I think anybody might be able to find easily. I want to do all can the examiner combine these two references? And if they can, what do I put in the spec as a rebuttal to that? Because I never want to rely on a declaration, because then you're subjecting the signer to depositions, and nobody likes that. And if you make somebody cry, you get extra points. It's not a fun thing to do. So if you can preload all that stuff into the application before you file it, there shouldn't be a lot of unexpected problems later, and your patent should come out pretty good, I think, at the end of the process, because you've already anticipated what the offices are going to do. Just filing it and hoping for the best is, in my opinion, not a way to build a patent ready, licensing ready portfolio.
I absolutely agree with that, Dean, very much and wholeheartedly. So looking at the clock, this has been a great conversation, but we're going to have to wrap up here momentarily. So before we go, rapid fire, if we can, elevator pitch length. What is your takeaway message for the audience today? And Carl, I'll start with you. What do you want folks to remember about this conversation?
A strong portfolio has been thoughtfully crafted based on what the company is currently doing and what the company thinks the market is going to do in the future. That's how you get revenue generating opportunities. The second thing I'll say is, it used to be the case that you could build a portfolio through continuation practice. The better course now is, if you're going to file an original application, a PCT, whatever you do, consider filing multiple families, because multiple families drive value in a way that a pure continuation can't.
Awesome. Thanks. And Dean, the final word goes to you.
If you represent somebody who's just interested in getting a large number of patents, and there's certainly a good business case for that, you'd be on the top 10 list or to get funding from a VC or private equity or whatever. There's certainly some validity to that. If you are actually drafting patents that cover things that people are selling, convince your clients to spend the extra $3,000 to do a search, even if it's an outside search. Convince them that to pay the $180 to file the IDSs, even though the art is cumulative, because you're going to spend tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars litigating these things. And in operational risk management, the second tenet in the military is never take any unnecessary risks. So if you can eliminate all that risk up front, you're going to save a lot of money later, and you might go straight to licensing versus litigation.
Yeah, and it's gotten all the easier with searching with the AI. That's something AI does really, really well. The AI searches are, nothing's foolproof, but if you have a person do it, it's not foolproof either. The AI searching is really very, very good already, and you can get it right away. and it gives you instant intelligence. So that would be my takeaway message. I've thought this my entire career, not enough people do searches. How could you hope to describe what is new and innovative if you don't really know what else is out there? Our job is to design a patent application around the prior art, which you simply can't do if you don't know what the prior art is.
Can I build on that for 1 second?
Sure, quick.
Not only is the prior art search critical to a strong patent portfolio, but turn that prior art search into a mini patent landscape. Because if a company has one patent that comes up in your search, they probably have 10. Figure out what they're doing, and their patent portfolio is going to give you and your client a window into where they're investing. And if you do that for every company that comes up in a prior art search, you'll have a mini landscape and you'll have a sense of where you want to place bets when you're claiming things.
Thank you for listening to IP Watchdog Unleashed. We will be back next week, and we hope you will join us again. In the meantime, please be sure to visit ipwatchdog.com to read all the latest news and information about what is happening in the intellectual property world. And also be sure to subscribe to our free daily email newsletter.